It is indeed 4 years since I last talked to you. There have been enormous changes since then. In particular, there's been, I think, a sea change, actually, in recent weeks even, when the leaders of all three political parties suddenly piped up and started talking about immigration. Perhaps nowadays I should say all four party leaders, yes. Because Mr. Farage has also spoken frequently and often bravely. And not before time. I would suggest to you that the present scale of immigration poses the greatest threat to our social cohesion that we've ever faced. And you know, I also suggest that the failure of the political class to address that issue has undermined confidence in our entire political system. So I think it's high time that we address the issue on the basis of facts. That is what Migration Watch has been doing for the last 11 years, and that's what I propose to do now. I will leave, if I may, the politics to the politicians who are going to speak after me. I'm just going to divide this into three sections. First of all, what is the problem? Secondly, what is the government doing about it? And lastly, is it working? Can we indeed control immigration? Or, not to put too fine a point on it, is any attempt to control immigration going to be blown out of the water by our membership of the European Union? The problem we have with immigration is the scale of it. As you can see from the diagram there, I think you can all see it, it's a new problem. There was no significant immigration before 1997. Since then, it has risen by a factor of 5, from 50,000 to 250,000. And surprise, surprise, public concern has risen in a similar manner. Indeed, over the past 10 years, it has averaged 200,000 every year. And the public are not in the least bit convinced of the nonsense we're told about this being a country of immigrants. We are not. We never have been. The number of migrants who, net migrants in 2010 exceeded the number between 1066 and 1950. Now, in considering how to tackle this, as the public want to see, it's quite a good idea to see where they will come from. And that tells you quite clearly the red line is British emigration below the negative. The blue line is EU, and then above that, you see a green line, I think, which has risen very substantially. That is non-EU, and that is where most of the immigration has come from. I'll leave aside Romania and Bulgaria for the moment, but up till now, British emigration to the world as a whole has pretty well cancelled out people from the EU 15. And this one underlines the point that it's non-EU migration that has added to the numbers. The inflow is the blue line above, and you can see a very substantial increase since about, well, 97 really. But the number of people leaving, which is the red line at the bottom, is pretty well horizontal. So there's been a very substantial increase in arrivals from outside the European Union, but not in departures. It follows, therefore, that it makes absolute sense in policy terms to focus first on non-EU migration, over which we have powers and which need to be operated. Why should we worry? Well, our central concern is the impact on population. It's written there, it will go up by nearly 7 million in the next 15 years. 2/3 due to immigration. You don't often see that, but 2/3 of our population increase is a result of new immigration and their children. Not people who are settled here, but new arrivals and their children. And this is what happens to the population. You may not be able to read that from the back, but the bottom line is what happens if you have net migration of 40,000. That's those who come minus those who go. The one above that is 100, then 140, and the top one is what we are currently experiencing, 200. And you can see it goes up to 75,000 in about 20 years' time. Now, of the increase in the next 15 years alone, that's 5 million people. I mentioned 2/3 will be down to immigration. Well, that 2/3 is the 5 million immigrants. That is equivalent. That's equivalent to building the cities of Birmingham, Leeds, Glasgow, Sheffield, I haven't finished, Bradford, Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol. All those cities is 5 million people. That is what immigration will add to our population in 15 years. We'd have to build the equivalent of those cities. You know what? There's no money.
Excuse me. One simple question. Are those figures including illegal immigrants?
No. No, none of these figures include illegal immigrants. And of course, the pressure is already showing. It's showing on maternity units, it's showing on primary schools, it's showing on housing, and so on. This very day, those of you who picked up an Evening Standard will see there are going to be 118,000 places short in the next 2 years. They've spent $1 billion already expanding the schools. They've offered another $1 billion to expand them further. You know what? This report in the Evening Standard, there's a word missing. It begins with I. Immigration. It is not mentioned. And you know something else? The entire population increase in London over the last 10 years in the census period went up by 1 million. It was entirely due to immigration. Entirely. The UK-born population of London didn't change in that time. It's entirely immigration. And nobody will mention it, even now. That's why I say it's time we had an intelligent debate based on the facts, and let's look at them in the face and deal with them. That's not being anti-immigrant, I don't need to say that, but we do need to know what the facts are and discuss them honestly. So, what are the government doing? Well, as you know, they've set an overall target of tens of thousands in the next, by the end of this Parliament. Don't confuse that with the cap on economic migration. That's only a very small part of the whole picture, and it's about 7%. They've put a cap of 20,000. The real target is for the whole net migration across the board, and the good news is that setting the target has had a huge impact on the system, on the Home Office, on a whole lot of them. It's supported strongly by the Home Secretary and by the Prime Minister, and it is getting things done. Now, I'll stay out of the detail. Those that come up in questions if you want it, but they have reviewed the three main routes: students, economic migration, and marriage, and the numbers are indeed starting to come down. The last numbers we have to last June were down by 30% from the peak under Labour. So let me move straight on to the last section of my talk. So it's a good idea to say the last section, isn't it, or in conclusion. It sort of wakes up an audience when they think that you're coming to the end of this spiel. I may cheat in a moment, but I mean this is indeed the last section. It is starting to work, the numbers are coming down, another 2 years to go. We think the government have a fighting chance of getting to their objective. But there is a distinct risk that Romania and Bulgaria will throw them off. They have declined, as you well know, to give any kind of estimate, so we thought we'd help them a little. Don't think they saw it like that. We reckon that it will be about 50,000 a year for the next 5 years from those two countries together. It's really difficult to make estimates of this kind in any case, but in this particular case there are two wild, very wild cards. One is the fact that there are already 1 million Romanians and Bulgarians in Spain and another 1 million in Italy. Both those countries in severe economic difficulty. Every possibility, well, let's be careful, some possibility that they will relocate north And if they do, the new countries available to them will include Germany, Netherlands, France and the UK. So, job prospects better in Germany, living conditions better here, and of course we have the international language. The other wild card is a slightly delicate one, which is the existence of about 1.5 million Roma in those countries, who have a fairly miserable existence, some of whom might decide to migrate for a better life. So the bottom line is we do face a potential problem. If that movement is very limited, then the government will reach their target and will have a major achievement to their credit. But there could be a substantial inflow. Now, some of you may be aware of a BBC poll that was conducted by Newsnight only yesterday and has been in quite a lot of the press. The BBC tried desperately to underplay its significance. They read out a row of tiny fractions of a percent. What they didn't say is that you multiply them by about 15 million. The bottom line is that, according to the poll, and they're dodgy, these polls, admittedly, but according to the poll, 350,000 people from those two countries are actively considering work in the UK, and 120,000 are making concrete plans for next year. If that turns out to be the case, of course, that will have very substantial implications, politically and otherwise, to my colleagues here, in this country. It may not actually show up in the numbers before the election, the numbers published before the election, in which case the government will be able to take the credit for the achievements they have indeed made of cutting the 70% of migration that is not from the European Union. But, and here's the but, if there is a substantial flow, then it does raise in spades the question, can we control our own borders while we're still members of the European Union? Now, it may be that the migration from Poland and other countries will sort of tail off, and that from Romania and Bulgaria it will do the same. So not yet. So I slightly slow this. That's it. That shows you net migration from Poland and the other countries who joined 7 years ago. It fell sharply, this is 2008 where it drops. It fell sharply in the recession, but then is climbing again. So there's no sign that it will tail off continuously and substantially. For this reason, the blue is arrivals and the red is departures. And you can see that arrivals fell sharply, but so did departures in 2009, the right-hand half of the red, which suggests that people from Poland and other countries are deciding to stay here because the recession has hit their own countries at least as hard as here. There's another wrinkle, which is that these numbers don't actually catch everyone who comes. The numbers who come and join our population are roughly 2 or 2.5 times the number captured in the immigration stats. So what you get is this, which is the A8, we call them, those Poland and others. You see what's going on there, an absolutely steady increase, indeed a slightly sharper increase in the number as thrown up by the population stats. So the bottom line is that, is it going down for Poland and the others? No. It's going up at 100,000 a year. So, to conclude, I'm cheating here, but I am concluding. The The basic mistake is this, and it's a European mistake actually. The basic mistake was to extend free movement of labour and full access to benefits to countries with a GDP per head about a quarter or a fifth of ours. That was a fundamental error. Now, you can make a case for having Poland and the others in Europe. There's a strategic case to be made. There's a case in terms of EU politics and so on. But the blindness with which it was done and the lack of thought goes back to what I mentioned earlier. People won't talk about immigration. Nobody liked to raise the issue. And so this is what has happened. And for so long as we have this disparity between our level of prosperity and these other now 10 countries, we can expect a continued inflow. I don't think we can stop workers coming here unless we pull out of the EU altogether. That's obviously a possibility, but that's the only way you can stop the workers coming. What you might be able to do as a possible measure would be to close off their access to benefits.
Yes.
It's not that they're coming for benefits now, most of them, but they may decide to stay because of the benefits, and there may be a new kind of person, as I mentioned, who might be coming for the benefit of the benefits. So I think it's really important. There's going to be a renegotiation of our relationship with Europe anyway, as part of the euro crisis. And I think it's of absolute importance that this question of access to benefits should be a major demand of ours in that renegotiation. Because the bottom line is this: another massive inflow of migrants from Romania and Bulgaria would be absolutely unacceptable to the public at a time of real economic difficulty.